Today, my wife and I are visiting Colonial Williamsburg, an amazing living history museum in Virginia that tells the early part of America's enduring story. Come along with me and my wife as we explore a history buff's paradise. That's coming up next.
Welcome to the exciting printing office.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I like saying that. Yeah.
So what exciting things are you working on right now?
Well, it's a do-it-yourself doctor book, believe it or not. I don't know how exciting that is. It's a little more scary than exciting. But yeah, it's called Every Man His Own Doctor, or the Poor Planter's Physician. So you've heard of WebMD? This is just like that, only way scarier than 1736, right? But anyway, so the idea is, doctors are expensive. They're allowed to charge 5 shillings for one visit. Now, if you're an unskilled worker, you might earn a shilling in a day, assuming you're paid and not a slave, right? So a shilling a day. So imagine paying up to 5 days your pay for an $8 visit. Well, you sell your copy of this book for 1 shilling. So a fifth as much if it didn't have any cover on it. Maybe double that if you have it bound, like above stairs. So, for an average person, this may seem like a reasonable buy. Right? Not only is it cheaper than a doctor's visit, but once you purchase it, you can use it over and over. It's good to the day you die. Which, to be honest, if you follow most of the advice in this book, that day is probably not as far off as you'd like to imagine. Again, it's a do-it-yourself doctor book from 1736. So should you purchase a copy of this, we do sell them down in the store. Not for a shilling, though. I don't know what they sell them for. But anyway, we do sell them down there. Don't actually try any of this at home. That's my little disclaimer. That was the ink, by the way, in case you're wondering. I put some fresh ink on. Now we're going to get our next sheet of paper, mounted in position, lining it up carefully with the Tippin sheet or guide sheet. All right. And hold it in place with the points. Now we can fold that down onto the form. That's what we call this, the form. Think of it like a big stamp. So we're going to press that paper down onto the form. That's why it's called a press. As you can tell, we're very imaginative with our terminology here in the shop, right? So freedom of the press, power of the press. Sure you've heard these expressions. Anyways, you can see the ink, or most of it, has transferred to the sheet, giving us yet another beautiful copy, if I may say so myself, of those 8 pages. Now, once that's ultimately done on side 2 and dried, all the sheets will be torn in half, and the half sheets are then folded down and then assembled as we saw, either stitched or bound, like they do above stairs. Did you all visit the binder?
Not yet.
So you can check them out in a little bit. So anyway, either stitched or bound in your complete product. All right. So that's sort of a brief synopsis of what's going on here. And interestingly, this is the 3rd edition of the book, 1736. The 2nd edition had come out 2 years before, in 1734. And we don't know when the 1st edition comes out because there doesn't seem to be a surviving copy of it. So presumably after 1730, because that's when the printer arrives in Virginia, but prior to 1734. So that means within no more than a 6-year period, they printed this thing 3 times, which means somebody was buying it. And then, of course, Franklin gets his hands on it up in Philadelphia and does several editions. He even had someone translate it into German, and for the German-speaking population, the Philadelphia region. And why let the English suffer alone? Let's take them down with us, I guess. That wasn't why they did it, but anyway, just shows you its popularity. Now remember, with each new print, someone had to reset the type. So again, that's a significant expense for the printer. You got to pay a guy to put all these letters together. So the very fact that printing it 3 different times indicates that somebody was buying it. Y'all familiar with typesetting? How each letter is a separate little. Of course, most of them aren't that size. This is the actual size of most of the letters we're using here today, and I unfortunately can't pass it around because of the pandemic and all. But there's a little letter on there. You might be able to see it. A little O. I had this little boy in here about 3 weeks ago, and he says it's a baby O, which is obviously adorable. Now, each letter, each space, each punctuation mark is a separate block, and there's about 7,000, maybe 8,000 of them just in this set of 8 pages alone. So this may be anywhere from 4 to 6 hours to set that up. And then of course a proof would be printed. Corrections would be made on the proof after it was read. Corrections would be made in the metal. And then of course you print your copies, how many you're going to do. And then ultimately somebody would have put the letters back away in the type cases over there to be used again. So remember, it's not just setting the type, someone's got to sort the type. Which is, granted, takes less time than setting, maybe a quarter to a third of the time to sort it. But still, if this is 4 hours of work, that's an hour to an hour and a half of sorting later someone's got to do. And as the typesetter, you would ideally not have to do that yourself, because the typesetter is only paid for newly set, corrected type. So they're not paying for time it takes you to make corrections. That's obvious. Apparently, they're also not usually paying them for the time it takes to put the letters away. That's why you would suck someone else into doing that for you. So you're not putting your own type away. Someone who's not paid anyway. So an apprentice, perhaps, so they're not paid, right? Less than 21 years old. They're certainly top their basic reading and writing. They don't know how to work with type. In this shop, possibly one of the slaves would be sort of dragged into that. Assuming, of course, they were taught to read and write, we don't know. Open question, but But again, someone besides the typesetter will want someone else to do that for them, because that's what it's all about. Maximizing your profit on the backs of the less fortunate, right? Anyway, let's do another copy here. So that's the two main processes. So you got typesetting and you got press work, and then of course there's other little odds and ends. So any specific questions at all? Anything? While we're here, after all.
I have a question. I kind of mind. How I understand the process of bringing the letters together.
Sure.
But how were they kept together? Because I would imagine if it's a whole hundreds or thousands of small letters, how were they not kept from small Lego pieces being?
Well, they don't interlock. They just clamped in from the sides. So
okay.
The wedges. So we have the metal frame here, the face. We have these wedges called coins, and then squared off piece of wood called furniture. So so by driving this wedge together, you're just clamping them in tightly. So if you were to knock those loose, in theory, you can knock those over like dominoes. So it's not like they interlock, or they're not magnetic or anything like that. So yeah.
So it was just like clamping basically from the outside.
Yeah, they're just being squeezed in. Now that's one of the reasons it's so important that all lines be exactly the same width, and to be in the same number of lines per page. Right? So in other words, the pages need to all be the same width and the same height, because otherwise when you try to clamp it in there, something's not going to be tight. If one of the lines doesn't have enough space in it, for example, the letters in there can be loose. And this ink is actually sticky enough, you can actually pull the letters up out of there. If they're smaller size like these, You can see how tacky that ink is. Alright?
And what is the ink made of?
Sorry, I just noticed a piece of trash on there, so I'm going to scrape that off real quick. It's mainly varnish. So y'all are familiar with varnish, right? It's essentially clear paint. And then you add, for this ink, you're going to add lamp black, which is essentially a very pure form of soot. So it's not too far off the mark to think of this ink as being black paint. You know why I like to tell people that it's not too far off the mark to think of this ink as being black paint? It's because this ink is black paint. So you might even say, it's right on the mark, they call it. So basically a varnish is oil, usually linseed oil, although train oil could be used, which is from whales and seals, or walnut oil for that matter. And that's typically combined with pine sap or sometimes with amber, and then they're cooked together into varnish, which again is like a thick, clear paint. And then you add your pigment. So the pigment in this case is lamp black, a very pure form of soot. And believe it or not, lamp black is actually made by a specialist. So we're not going to use the soot from the back of the fireplace over there. Too many impurities. We need special soot. Alright? So it's true. Well, we're special, so we need special soot. So we're going to buy this very pure form of soot from a lamp black maker back overseas. And believe it or not, that's what that guy does for a living. So a lot of people come in here and they say they feel sorry for this and us, and this looks like a terrible job and all that. And I always remind them there are worse fates than being a printer in the 18th century. Used to be the guy that makes soot for a living. Or worse yet, the apprentice of the guy who makes soot for a living. Right?
Who doesn't get paid
right.
for doing the same job.
And probably gets all the nasty parts of the job. So yeah, so one of the points we try to drive home here in the shop, and all the trade shops, is we're not very self-sufficient. We don't make the letters, we don't make the ink, we don't make the paper, we don't build the press. And most of that stuff is imported from overseas. So during the war, that's going to sort of start becoming a problem. You find all of our all our tools and materials, they're all imported.
Well, that's a wrap for this Colonial Williamsburg video. I hope you really enjoyed it, getting to see another part of this amazing living history museum. If you like this sort of stuff, check out my other videos. Check out colonialwilliamsburg.org to plan your own visit here, because it's so much cooler in real life than it is on film. Till next time, this is History Buff, TN Photobug signing out, and I'm having a blast with the past.